As the city that's heavily dependent on groundwater and Kaveri water braces for the summer, the BWSSB, as an advance measure, has announced restrictions on use of potable water for non-essential purposes like gardening, cleaning of cars, and several others. Fines and penalties will be imposed on those flouting the rules, but is implementation the nightmare, and is this only aspect to address the find long-term sustainable solution to the city's water resources? Joining me this evening, two committed conservationists in Bengaluru, Veena Srinivasan of Well Labs and Madhuri Mandava of Pani.Earth. Madhuri, first to you. Really, some of these measures are stopgap, immediate crisis management measures. But in terms of building the city's resilience, in terms of water availability from a long-term sustainable point of view, it's entirely dependent on rejuvenating our rivers and our lakes, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. But I think the bigger issue is that we don't value water, whether it's the water that's coming from our rivers or the water that's beneath the groundwater. We pump Kaveri water over 100 kilometers, and 500 meters uphill at a massive energy cost. Why is it being allowed to be used for non-potable purposes other times? This law only when we hit crisis. Shouldn't this be the norm? We send polluted water back downstream and exploit Kaveri. Why is this being even allowed? Groundwater is no different. We drill bore wells endlessly. We keep hearing them ringing in our ears all through the year. But the regulation is remembered only when the water table collapses, and only short-lived. We get plenty of rain, yet most of it, it washes away into the drains, mixed with sewage, and into our rivers. We only remember rainwater harvesting laws when we hit a crisis. It's not a year-round priority. Now, you were talking about rivers. I'm surprised when you even use that word, because when we talk about rivers, only people remember Kaveri. But we have the rivers of Bengaluru in Bangalore, which no longer are remembered as rivers, but drains. Be it the Arkavati, Rishabhavati, Suvarnamukhi, Dakshin Pinakini, or be it the Belandur-Vartur stream, which is actually a natural waterway. We have forgotten that these Bangalore's lakes, right, are part of the larger river system. We thankfully have citizens who work for lakes, who allow the pollution to just be diverted downstream. What takes that? It's the river. So our rivers are poisoned with industrial pollution. We don't seem to address the white elephant and keep proposing for more and more and more, sewage treatment plants, which have to come in, and the rivers don't get cleaned up.
Right.
So I think when you say we have to revive rivers and lakes, right, it's not just about these token mechanisms which are not holistic, like cleanup, sewage treatment plants, but we need to enforce all the existing laws that are on paper all the time, so that it's not just, in crisis, but it actually becomes the norm, and make rivers part of our collective memory again, because we cannot depend on far and far away sources like Kaveri, next is Sharavati, Yetinahole. We just destroy everything for Bangalore's Tidlik, it's like Tidlik the frog, which is ever thirsty.
It's an important point that you make there, which needs to be underlined and emphasized. Veena, a response to a crisis situation in terms of potable water, which needs to be perhaps the perennial rule in a city like Bengaluru. B, there needs to be further sustainable action across the board, a collective effort to ensure that the city's water resources are sustainable in the long run.
Absolutely. I think the one thing that we don't recognize is the crisis that we had last summer was a groundwater crisis. It wasn't actually, Kaveri supply to the city actually increased in the summer months slightly last year. And BWSSB did a reasonable job in kind of responding by bringing in the Kaveri fifth stage and so on. But as Madhuri said, there simply isn't enough water to supply the thirst of an ever-growing city, because the city, every new phase of the city grows faster than it's possible to actually lay the pipes and bring water from thousands of kilometers away, destroying some forests. So the only option we have is actually, treat the water that we have, which is the only water that we have is actually groundwater and wastewater. And basically, if we don't stop using those two judiciously, then we're not going to actually be able to solve the crisis. What we found is, in work that Well Labs did, we found that, even if you did all of the rainwater harvesting and recharged all of the lakes, you're at the most going to get 20% extra supply. But 80% of the water that we use goes back into drains as wastewater. And anybody who lives in the city next to a smelly drain knows that our cities' rivers, quote unquote, don't actually contain fresh water. They contain treated or untreated sewage. And so the best thing we can do is actually to say, how do we make use of that precious resource that currently we look at it as a nuisance? Now, the thing is that people are willing to pay for fresh water. They're not willing to actually pay for treating wastewater and reusing it, because that's considered, something which is messy, dirty, something we don't want to deal with. And so the only way that we can actually unlock that value in wastewater, make people actually pay for the treatment, is actually to do stuff like this, which is to say, don't waste fresh water for everything. That will force people to use treated wastewater, which will in turn force the investment in wastewater systems, whether centralized or decentralized, and then will unlock actually a whole bunch of innovation that's required to actually make this entire ecosystem work. So I think it's overall fairly desirable, because we've tried.
I know you're making very, very strong points, Veena. I'm sorry, I'm just into the last 30 seconds of this conversation. I just have a very, very quick citizen-centric question. Are we expecting to brace to a situation like what we did last year, or are we better off this year? Yes or no?
Yes, I think we're better off this year, because Kaveri fifth stage would have come in, and that would have taken a little bit of the pressure off wastewater. Just remembering there's not enough water in Kaveri fifth phase for everybody's greed, just for everybody's need, and therefore we have to do better.
Okay. Madhuri, do you think we are bracing for a situation of the nature that we saw last year?
I think we will do better this year, because treated wastewater is getting used. We have heard of a lot of apartments which retrofitted their thing to do, use treated water for flushing. So I think we'll do better actually this year. But it should be the norm, so that we are prepared for this crisis forever, not just during this time. Yeah.
All right. Be prepared for a crisis like water. Time's also short, and we've completely run out of it on the show. But thanks to the two of you for joining me here this evening on The Southern View. That's all we have time for on The Southern View this evening. News and updates continue right here on NDTV. Thanks for watching.